Okay, well today we're continuing talking about the early national government, the Articles of Federation, move into the Constitutional Convention, talk about Robert Morris, the Land Ordinance 1785, the Northwest Ordinance 1787, Shays' Rebellion, the Annapolis Convention. The Constitutional Convention includes James Madison, the Virginia Plan, the New Jersey Plan, the Connecticut Compromise, the Three-Fifths Compromise, and the debate on ratification, included groups called the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions on those? Yeah, we're in Chapter 7 here. All right. So we talk about the Articles of Federation, basically the first national constitution, an extremely different form of national government we have now. Essentially, it was just Congress. But as a Congress, it had little power to act, little power to pass any kind of laws. Any type of significant law took the majority, took 9 out of 13 states to approve. And the amendment took all 13 states to ratify. But did form a few committees to help move things along. You had the Department of Foreign Affairs, basically handled correspondence between different nations, ambassadors and so forth. Department of Finance to how much money the country had.
Oh, yeah.
And the War Department. They said the federal government kept these afterward, retooling them after the Constitutional Convention as the State Department, Finance Department becoming the Treasury Department. But the War Department stayed the War Department until the military was reorganized after World War II, becoming the Defense Department in 1947. And of course, you had a post office in effect in 1775. The thing about the post office in those days was it didn't cost you anything to send out mail, but it cost you money to receive mail. Because if you had a letter in the mail, you'd have to pay a couple cents or however much to receive it. Yeah.
Why?
They just thought that system just worked out better. So I'm not sure why they decided that system, but what they ended up deciding on getting a letter in those days was something really amazing. But to send one out wasn't much effort at all.
Right.
I remember even today, you can send a letter out anywhere in the country for just 49 cents. It's more expensive than it should be, but it's still a pretty good deal. Well, you understand also, no president or prime minister or anything like that. Just Congress. Just you're a member of Congress for your state. And so there's no one really heading up the government, no one in authority to look to. Now, the Speaker of the House would sometimes call himself President, but that was not as a formal title or a formal position of government. He wasn't charged with anything, just running the debate in Congress. It's simply presiding over it. No special authority. You also had a Secretary of Congress, basically someone who took down the minutes and official correspondence. That was Charles Thomson. Had that position from 1774 to 1789. There's probably only one person of any real significance who tried to do anything with the Confederation government. That was Robert Morris. He's the first head of the Finance Committee. They wanted to do is strengthen the Confederation government and devise a plan to make the government's finances more stable through a taxation and debt management. And see, the problem the United States had after the American Revolution was it's flat broke. Spent everything it had on the war. The states are deep in debt because they had their own state militias fighting back and forth. The national government was had the Continental Army. These are very expensive undertakings, but the problem with the Arkansas Federation government was they can't impose taxes or anything. There's no way to collect. No Internal Revenue Service, no, really not even a place really to mail in any tax dollars. It's whatever they brought with them. There was, because remember the basic problem they're having. What are the two ways the government can pay off bills? It can borrow, but the Federation government's borrowed everything it can, and raise taxes, but can't raise taxes because the states won't go along with it. The country doesn't pay off its debts, who will want to do business with it? Already inflation's very high. Continental Congress issued a money called the Continental Dollar. Inflation came so high, the money came worth so little that the common expression at the time was that something was worthless. It wasn't worth a continental. Now, Morris, though, sees some possibilities with debt management. So here's what he's going to do. He's going to issue bonds in support of a wartime claim. Basically, hand out a series of IOUs to their creditors, saying the government owes you this much and we will pay it in the next number of years plus interest. But here's the problem was, the bonds that Morris issued worth only 10 to 15% on maturity because the government's credit rating was so bad. Basically, it wasn't even worth face value. Simply because the government simply had no money to pay it off with. In 1781, Morris gained approval of something called the Bank of North America. This would be a government-run bank. But it would be a privately funded bank. If there's money going into it, would be put in by investors.
You said it was government?
Yeah, funded bank. Here's the thinking behind this bank. What money it does have, they have to put it somewhere. And so they can't just bury the coffee can in Robert Morris's backyard. So here's what they do. They're going to put it in this bank and have it collect interest. Remember how a bank basically works. Customers like you will put your deposit your paycheck, savings into a bank. But it's not just sitting there with a little envelope with your name on it in the safe. It's basically they take that money and loan it out. They'll loan it to people who buying a house, buying a car, starting a business, things like that. And as they repay that money, what they pay with it, the extra they pay with it, the interest split up by the bank and by the customers. So that's a tiny little bit of interest you get on your accounts for that.
Right.
Morris is thinking that here, all this money the government has, or little it does have for a while, will be loaned out by the Bank of North America for businessmen and others who are starting various business projects, internal improvements projects. Basically, the government's getting back a little bit of interest on its money. Plus the fact, tax dollars the government does have here is going out to loans, is building infrastructure for the country. Needed projects needed by the country. So the country makes money, the government makes money, everybody makes money, everybody's happy. Problem. All the states have their own state banks, run by their own state governments, plus the privately held banks. They don't want the competition. Congress thinks it's a good idea. Congress has passed this, but and the Arkansas Federation, it would take all 13 states to agree. They're not agreeing to it. So the Bank of North America fails. Over the war, Morris also kept gaining for Congress power to levy a 5% import duty for revenue. It's basically a flat 5% on anything coming in to collect money for the government. But that also took 13 states. Rhode Island refused to go along with it. The proposition failed. So Morris is trying all these different things back and forth, but just can never quite convince everybody to go along with it. Eventually, he's frustrated. By 1783, he resigns from it, reverts back to committee status. But all these ideas he had for collecting revenue for the government, he's actually going to set the stage for how the federal government starts collecting money once the Constitution is ratified. So they pull out all these ideas years later for running the federal government. There was also some unrest in the years after the war because Congress can't pay the Army. Paychecks are being delayed towards the end of the war. A lot of men were promised bonuses for signing up with the Continental Army. The government couldn't pay up. So in some areas you have demonstrations, protests over the government's inability to pay its own bills. Now, in spite of these serious economic problems, Congress did have some success with an area called the Northwest Territory. The 1780s was the border of the United States, western border, Mississippi River. That means the Northwest is Wisconsin and Illinois. The whole area around the Great Lakes, that's the Northwest. Before the American Revolution, before the Articles of Federation, different states claimed those territories, from Ohio up to Wisconsin to Michigan and down to Illinois, as for business purposes. Trying to settle those areas, sell those lands, make money off it. But you got half a dozen different states claiming these different lands. Well, eventually, it decided Continental Congress is going to take over. So by the mid-1780s, the states had abandoned their claims in the area. And as early as 1779, Congress decides that they're going to turn this whole area one day into a series of states, brand new states, equal to the original states. And all sorts of plans for it, and all sorts of different designs for the borders of these states. Kind of area which kind of design you can imagine. Like say Michigan, the two peninsula system, that wasn't in any of the plans, but just by accident turned out that way. Well, in 1784, Thomas Jefferson proposed that when a particular area reached a population of the smallest existing state, that area would become a state. But Congress realized, first you got to get people out there. This land is owned by the national government, so they're trying to bring people out there to settle it. How they can do that is Land Ordinance 1785. This is a time period when land was wealth. You have land, you have money. Congress realizes it has a lot of debt, but also has a lot of land. They can work it out that way. Now, the land ordinance is doing is basically, it's going to be selling lands to the settlers, speculators, whoever wants it, but they have to organize how this land is going to be doled out. So they send a whole series of surveyors out there to survey the land. And they set up these rectangular patterns of surveying and distributing it. So they have these each area, 36 square miles across, is going to be divided into 36 sections. So essentially, it's a 6 miles across. It's a 6 miles across. 36 square miles are calling this area a township. So you have these 36 lots. Each is 1 square mile, which is roughly about 640 acres. That's a good chunk of land. Congress declared that this land be sold for no less than $1 an acre.
Well,
That's good cheap land.
sure.
So especially considering you got land in areas like Dallas and Houston, they're going for like $1 million an acre. Here's the thing, it's not subdivided. $640, 640 acres, that's a good deal. Not a lot of people have that kind of money on hand. The term's actually favoring investors, speculators who will then subdivide and sell this land for a profit. But Congress is thinking ahead. Think forward to the time when this next generation of Americans is going to be running their own communities, running their own states. They're going to have to know how to govern themselves, which means they need an education. They need to know how to read and write so they can understand contracts, laws, their own history. They can manage budgets. So the proceeds from sales from every 16th section for every township, proceeds from that would go to financing public school for that township. Pretty good deal. This is a time when public schools are very rare and a lot of people, and actually a lot of opposition to it. And help bring people further out there, in 1787, Congress voted to grant 1.5 million acres for $1 million for certificates of indebtedness for veterans. Basically, they're going to trade the IOUs they have for veterans for land in the Northwest Territory. It works out pretty well. If you're ever in an airplane flying over Ohio, you see these nice rectangular little grids on the ground. It's because of Land Ordinance 1785. It's brought thousands upon thousands of people to these areas. But of course, once you got the people out there, what kind of laws are they going to live under? Because the areas aren't organized into territories or states yet. That's where the Northwest Ordinance comes in 1787. Basically replaced Jefferson's ordinance with a more specific framework for creating territorial governments. Essentially, Congress would start by Congress creating a territory, basically setting out an area, declaring the specific boundaries, what area would be territory. When a territory is established, you have a governor, secretary of territory. This secretary handle everything from basically a combination of Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, all sorts of things. I also have 3 judges, court cases, and also certifying land claims and so forth, all chosen by Congress. And eventually they're planning 3 to 5 territories. As it turns out, they end up producing 5 states. That's just the first step. Territory is created. Second, when the territory has a population of 5,000 adult males, remember, only men can vote, they could then form a territorial assembly that is their own legislature. The territorial governor would have a veto over anything this legislature puts out, but Congress has a veto also. Third part, we have a total population of 60,000 in a territory. It can mean a convention to drop the state constitution and apply to Congress for statehood. Now, what ends up happening as a result of this is basically the process which all areas end up becoming states, or most territories become states once the Constitution is ratified. Arkansas went through this. Territories created in 1819. Arkansas Territory's population of 5,000 adult males, so they formed the Arkansas Territorial Assembly. 1835, they have Arkansas Territory has its constitutional convention for a state constitution. Congress approves. Arkansas admitted as a state in 1836. Same thing for almost every other territory in the United States. The Missouri Territory, Louisiana Territory, Mississippi, Alabama, Kansas, you name it. There's also some extra in here in the bill, the Northwest Ordinance. First, you have the Bill of Rights for the citizens of the area. It's included guarantees of freedom of religion, freedom of speech, trial by jury, and so forth, guaranteed by the Northwest Ordinance. You'll have these certain basic rights guaranteed by the national government.
Does the Bill of Rights also express the right to keep and bear arms?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the Northwest Ordinance Bill of Rights had, but that will come up in the Bill of Rights ratified in 1791. So this is not the same as the ones in the Constitution. It's years before that. But there were states drawing up their own Bill of Rights that did have the right to keep and bear arms in it. But there was no national Bill of Rights yet. Still a couple of years ahead before that. But another interesting part of this was slavery was excluded from the Northwest Territory. Slavery would never exist then. That wasn't such a big deal in the 1780s. People expected slavery to probably be phased out eventually. So it wasn't much of a debate over that. But in the Southwest Territory, the area south of the Ohio River, slavery was permitted. They start seeing what's happening here. As the Northwest Territory grows, you have this large area of free territory. As the Southwest Territory grows, you have this large area, increasing numbers of plantations and slaves. And back in the Northeast, areas north of Maryland, slavery is being phased out. But in the Southeast, Virginia South, Maryland, including Maryland, more people coming in, more plantations developing, more slaves coming in. The thing happening is two sides of the country are starting to go in separate directions. One half based on free labor, the one based on a racial hierarchy system. What's happening in the area southwest of the Ohio River? Got areas like Kentucky, population is growing very rapidly. But And in area Tennessee, also growing very rapidly. Very rich farmland. Let's get to west of the mountains. Interestingly enough, when North Carolina gave up its land claims in the areas west of the Appalachians, the area that would become Tennessee, there was a group of settlers upset with the North Carolina government, tried to break away and form their own state, the state of Franklin, which ended up being eastern Tennessee. But you have a serious content of arguments among settlers and with the North Carolina government over land claims. But no one ever recognized Franklin. Continental Congress refused to recognize it, and in 1789, the whole idea of the state of Franklin is dropped, and the whole thing will eventually become part of Tennessee. She has similar problems in eastern Kentucky. Now, Virginia is going to have problems for years because they have a bunch of people living in eastern Virginia in the Tidewater areas. Plus, these are all more well established farms and plantations. It's where the bulk of the money is also. But you have these settlers back in the mountains, area that is now West Virginia, areas of now eastern Kentucky. You have a lot of arguments over how seats can be doled out in the legislature, how these areas are going to be represented. And for years, these arguments threatening to tear Virginia apart until finally get to the Civil War and the whole thing just falls apart. But for a while in eastern Kentucky, there's actually a group of settlers trying to call the area Transylvania. Like I said, no, not vampires and things like that. It's nothing to do with Romania. They're basically transition land. Interestingly enough, there is a state university in eastern Kentucky called Transylvania State. There's that name there. But it's going to be a lot of arguments over land, political power, and money. As for the tribes, they're decimated by the Revolutionary War.
Yes.
They backed the British during the war. Colonists responded furiously, devastating tribal settlements all along the up and down the Appalachians. The Treaty of Fort Stanwix, 1784, the Iroquois Confederacy ceded the last of their lands in western New York and Pennsylvania, moving further west. Treaty of Hopewell in 1785, the Cherokees abandoned their claims in South Carolina, western North Carolina, was large areas of Kentucky and Tennessee. There still is a large Cherokee community there in the Appalachians on the Tennessee-North Carolina border. In 1785, most of the tribes in Ohio gave up their land claims to the United States. There's still a lot of tribes that end up fighting with the settlers over land claims. Back in southern Georgia, the Creek tribe is being backed by the Spanish to attack settlements in Georgia. But we talked about earlier the problem of inflation. Actually, we have a very serious problem with the economy at this point. The country had not managed to make the transition from wartime back to a peacetime economy. Plus, the states are cut out of the British mercantile system. Now, the colonies have made a lot of money being part of the British Empire, trading with different parts of the empire around the world, but since they declared independence and won the war, Britain said, "You're not trading with us anymore." Cut them out entirely. So that's forcing the Americans to try to find new avenues of trade. Now, trade between Britain and America would slowly resume, but not enough to pull America out of the post-war depression. Foreign Affairs Department's busy trying to make trade treaties with other countries. We can trade with France and the Netherlands, but other countries are very slow to open trade with the United States. In the meantime, though, people have so little money, the states have so little money, that states actually began issuing their own paper money to help farmers raise commodity prices and help payments of debts. Now, for most states, the state money was basically the credit to farmers and issuing small loans, but practically after that as currency. Rhode Island went so far as to declare its money to be legal for all debts, public and private. Not just paying taxes, but for public debts as well. Basically, that's their official money. The problem was Rhode Island money isn't worth anything. And you have the wealthy creditors, all the rich people have loaned that money to everybody, end up fleeing the state so that they can't be repaid in worthless Rhode Island money. So it's serious problems they're facing. But you have to understand, you can talk about the economy and the abstract in terms of dollars and cents, numbers, gross domestic product, but that really doesn't matter to the average man on the street. The concern of the average citizen is not the big macroeconomic picture of trade deficits, factory orders, consumer confidence, and all that. They're worried about the microeconomic situation at home. Are they going to pay the bills? Are they going to keep their house? Are they going to feed the kids? And that's the most important part of what driving economic decisions for the average person. So they couldn't care less if the state has its debt paid off. Is that going to affect them or not? Their interest is survival. Mid-1780s, people were having a hard time doing that. The United States has very little respect abroad. We're just some new weak country, the new kid on the block. Yeah, everybody's glad that the U.S. beat Britain, but beyond that, they really couldn't care. The U.S. really had very little to offer the world at this point. The United States is not the dominant power that it would be even a century later. The idea of the United States calling the shots of the international scene was laughable. So we had nothing to offer. We had no industry. We had no trade, no economic power. We're deep in debt. Essentially, all we were basically was just a collection of farmers and a few merchants living in the cities. That's about it. It's going to take time for the United States to build itself up. But in the meantime, the U.S. has serious diplomatic issues to deal with, not just least of which trying to open up trade with other countries. Problems with Britain continued. In spite of the treaties, Paris 1783, which gave the area from the Appalachians to the Mississippi River to the United States, Britain recognizing American independence, England was keeping forts in the Northwest Territory. It had a military presence on American soil without, against the wishes of the American government. The response of Britain, what are you going to do about it? Britain wasn't going to move. Second problem, border with Spanish territory in the south was not settled. Spain is claiming territory includes most of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia and Tennessee. The U.S. is pushing as far down to the Gulf of Mexico as they can. In the meantime, you still have debts with British merchants, the claims of the Loyalists. Some did manage to regain their property or get a settlement. Their attempts to try to get Great Britain to open up its trade in the West Indies, which had been so profitable for the colonies before the war. John Adams is sent as an ambassador to England to try to settle these issues, but he's largely ignored. Arguments with Spain over the border with Spanish Florida and navigation of the Mississippi River in the west. That is, they'd have to U.S. would have to travel through Spanish territory to get to the Gulf of Mexico. For all these border disputes, Spain wouldn't talk to the United States either. Problem gets worse in 1786, Shays' Rebellion. This is in Massachusetts. A more conservative regime taking power, started raising land and poll taxes higher and higher to pay off their state debts, particularly because who's in the legislature in Boston? All these bankers and businessmen who had loaned money to Massachusetts during the war. You want to make sure Massachusetts pays off its debts. Because who does Massachusetts owe this money to? These very same legislators. They're forcing the people to pay back the money the state owes to them. Well, they never issued any state money because that would lead to inflation. It's very obvious. But all these taxes, land taxes, poll taxes, basically just a head tax, basically about $1 for everyone in your household over 21 or something, or $1 for every cow you own, something like that. Well, who's paying these taxes? Working men, farmers. People barely have a dime to their name as it is. And so they're furious that they have to pay all these taxes so the state can pay all these rich men who have more money than they know what to do with in Boston. So in 1786, the Massachusetts legislature adjourned without taking any action on tax relief or printing paper money. Not to make it easier for farmers to pay off their taxes or their debts, not lowering taxes. So as a result, the 3 western counties of Massachusetts erupted into rebellion. Called Shays' Rebellion. Because one group was led by a man named Daniel Shays. Shays was a veteran of the American Revolution. He's a farmer. He's also bankrupt. And he is furious over how the legislature is treating him and his fellow farmers. He's worked all this time to build up a farm and take care of his family and fought for his country during the war. Just lose it all because of these bankers in Boston. So he gets a group of other farmers together, basically a debtor army, and they're threatening to make a move on Boston. But the first step is January 1787, some demonstrations and protests. They start marching towards Springfield, a big city in western Massachusetts, a big city today, where the Federal Arsenal is located. Basically, it's where the Continental Army kept some of its ammunition. They're going to take this ammunition and march on to Boston. Well, the state government heard what's happening. They send the state militia out to try to challenge Shays and disrupt the debtor army. And at Springfield, they confront Shays. Shays refuses to budge. The militia opens fire on Shays and his group, killing 4 men, sending the rest scattering. And the rebellion, for such as it was broken. But legislative leaders in Boston realized just how serious the situation was, quickly abolished a lot of these direct taxes they're upset with, lowered court fees, and exempted basic necessities from the debt process. What it ended up doing, though, was sending shockwaves across the country. Giving strength to the argument that the Arkansas Federation was not strong enough to meet the needs of the country. They needed a government with power and authority to be able to maintain order and be able to act with some authority, use the collective strength of the states to solve economic problems and diplomatic problems. So as it was, all these foreign countries are dealing with 13 separate countries. 13 states with 13 different sets of trade laws. a government that can't do anything. And now they see issues like Shays' rebellion, realizing it could all easily fall apart. Well, several meetings being held between prominent politicians to discuss their common problems. Most notable, which was the Annapolis Convention, 1786. Well, basically, just a convention just sitting there and talk about their common problems. They decided what the country needed is a new constitution, a new government. So James Madison is a delegate to the Annapolis Convention being held here in Maryland and proposes a meeting of all 13 states to discuss their common concerns. Now, of the Annapolis Convention, only 5 states actually sent delegates. Only 5 even bothered sending people over there. New England, Georgia, and Carolinas refused to attend, but one delegate from New York, Alexander Hamilton, who served with Washington during the American Revolution, sent a resolution calling for a new convention in Philadelphia, agreeing with Madison that they needed a newer, stronger government. So Hamilton's proposal that the states all get together became Constitutional Convention, proposed here in Annapolis, Maryland. Now, the convention itself is sometimes called the Constitutional Convention. February 1787, a few months after the Annapolis Convention, Congress reluctantly adopted a resolution endorsing the convention to revise the Articles of Federation. There's a few revisions, but 5 states had already named delegates. 6 more named them by the time the convention was scheduled again on May 14, 1787. New Hampshire delayed naming anybody until June of 1787, didn't send delegates until July. And Rhode Island wouldn't even send delegates at all. The state doesn't even send anybody. A lot of skepticism. This Patrick Henry of Virginia, long opponent of strong central government dating from the days before the Revolution, said he smelled a rat and refused to represent Virginia. But the convention begins. Room here. The convention begins on May 25th, 1787, convening in Philadelphia. "29 delegates from 9 states met initially. But as successful as the Constitution has proved to be, and as durable doctrine as it's proved to be, the initial results weren't very inspiring. State legislatures elected 73 men to attend the convention. But only 55 attended. Of those 55, only 39 signed the Constitution that resulted. Now, a meeting in Philadelphia in the summertime. In Philadelphia, now it's not South Arkansas, but it gets very, very hot there in the summers. Temperatures under the 90s, very high humidity. Like I said, many, many years before air conditioning came along. We got all these men meeting in a small room, probably not a whole lot bigger than this one, probably actually a little bit smaller. I carried a book here on page 193. You see a famed portrait of the signing of the Constitution. Been crammed in a small room at the Independence Hall. They got men dressed in heavy suits, sweating like hogs, and they're arguing over politics. So yeah, this is a lot of fun. This isn't going to be a lot of fun here. Well, the men came from vastly different backgrounds, vastly different interests, but knew they had to design a durable document that protected the safety of the nation, but also protected the liberties which they fought for in the American Revolution. Relatively young group of men overall. The average age is 42. The oldest delegate is Ben Franklin at age 81. He lived in Philadelphia, so it was convenient for him to come. Franklin had a lot of ideas, was involved in a lot of the debates. A lot of political veterans, some veterans of the American Revolution. Now, of the delegates that attended, 21 were veterans of the American Revolution. There's 21 actually were in the fighting. 7 had been governors. Most have been delegates to the Continental Congress. 8 had signed the Declaration of Independence. So essentially you have here is the core of the leadership of the Revolutionary era. You have lawyers, farmers, planters, merchants, bankers, well-read, revered men of their communities. And a quick note, Thomas Jefferson, one of the men who led the writing of the Declaration of Independence, he's not involved with the Constitution. At this point, he's ambassador to France. He's out of the country. But George Washington is a unanimously named president of the convention, actually presiding over the debates. As soon as an ordinary delegate, they make a president of the convention. Fellow delegates include George Mason of Virginia, who had written the Virginia Bill of Rights, and is a slaveholder and suspicious fellow government. A man named Gouverneur Morris, who was an aristocrat from New York, hated the masses, hated the common man. You have James Wilson of Pennsylvania. He's an immigrant from Scotland and one of the most respected lawyers in the country. You also have 32-year-old Alexander Hamilton of New York. He's an immigrant from the Bahamas. His family had a plantation in the Bahamas before he moved to New York. It served Washington, Trenton, and Yorktown. The star of the show, the most prominent member there was James Madison. He's 36, from Virginia, considered to be the father of the Constitution, center of most of the debates. There's a picture of him here in your book on page 189. Like I said, he was a protege of Thomas Jefferson. They worked together on a lot of issues in Virginia. Well, Madison, after the Annapolis Convention, prepared for the convention for months, poring over political treatises, studying historic forms of government, came to the convention as an expert on the subject of constitutions. Rapidly acknowledged as such. And this is a group that includes lawyers, legislators, governors. They're all saying he's the expert on constitutions. Well, Madison's from a family of Virginia planters, fairly well-to-do, but kind of short man, barely over 5 foot tall, high-pitched voice, nervous in front of crowds. He barely speaks above a whisper in front of crowds. Just very nervous in front of them. Suffered from chronic headaches that always bothered him. As a young man, he was dumped by his fiancée for a medical student. His girlfriend sent him a farewell note, sealed with bride note, as a note that she sent her note as a profession of indifference. But he ended up really getting better into the deal. He ended up marrying a very wealthy widow, Dolly Rutledge, Dolly Madison, who was certainly very beautiful, a very beautiful woman, vivacious personality. Basically, he ended up getting one of the most sought-after women in Virginia. College graduate, graduated from Princeton University. This well-educated, will do, is man coming forward with a lot of ideas. Now, what they're agreeing with here is, the Douglas agreed with here was basically they're going to have a republic. Agrees the premises that the government gained its powers from the consent of the governed, but they feared the tyranny of the majority. They don't want mob rule. They don't want riots in the streets. They want a government where people elect representatives, and the representatives calmly and rationally discuss the issues. They believe in giving power to the people, but just enough to keep checks and balances, keep one group from overpowering another group. Basically, the idea is keep one group from getting too powerful, but preserving their rights and their voice in the process. Basically, they want something in between tyranny and mob rule.
Oh, okay.
Something between an aristocracy and anarchy. So you have to remember, these men see the world very differently from what we do today in the 21st century. These were aristocrats. These were men raised with the idea that some people are better than others. So they don't quite trust the common man. They think they're a little bit better than the common man because of their education, their breeding, their money. That's why you still have states at this point where not everyone can vote. Only the property holders, those men with some means, are allowed to vote. Yeah.
But even though, by trying to, I think they were still, stuff that was still in them from what they learned from when they were, in the British raising. So even though they wanted new ideas, but still things that were in them still surfaced,
Exactly.
in the midst of all this. So
old habits die hard. Old
Right.
prejudices die hard. Like I said, but as aristocratic as these men were, so they're very forward-thinking for the time period.
right.
They want a republic. They don't want just a small group of men running everything. They want the people involved. They believe in the voice of the people. But they're afraid of too many voices doing too much. Because they'd seen what happened, or these were educated men, they'd seen what happened to republics in other governments here previous. When Britain abolished the monarchy and Oliver Cromwell came to power, they had a parliament basically that couldn't run the country, couldn't maintain order, caused order and chaos. But they also saw the old Roman Republic, where the people were supposed to be involved, but ended up becoming the Roman Empire. The Republic fell apart. One man seized power. They didn't want that to happen either. We also saw these small republics here, these city-states in Italy, where you had these very aristocratic groups that ended up seizing power, and the republics ended up slipping away. And others were, they disintegrated into anarchy. Now, they like what they have. They like the idea of a Republican representation. They managed to make it work in their own states. But they managed to make it work on a continental scale. Because the republic that is going to emerge, that is the United States, that is the largest republic since the Roman Empire. And they know what happened to Rome. They want something that's going to last. Now, say they believed in law and order, they believed in justice, they believed in civil liberties. They also believed, though, that ultimately education is going to be the ultimate protection of the government and the state. That as the people are going to run themselves, be parts of this government, they're going to have to be educated. Madison said on education, quote, "The diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty." The diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. That is, people must be educated, they must be informed. They must keep apprised of events going on in their communities, their states, and the nation as a whole. Which means they need to read newspapers.
That's like what Leonardo da Vinci says. Yeah, knowledge is power.
Exactly. Now, the doors of the Convention Hall were shut to keep proceedings secret. Now, the fear was outside interest interfering in the convention or rumors spreading about what they're doing. Just somebody hears an offhanded remark about something in a debate, and rumors running wild. So their plan is to meet, discuss this calmly and rationally, then present the final product for debate. Now, essentially, there are two questions before the convention. One, do you keep the Articles of Federation with some modifications, or do you scrap the Articles of Federation and start over? Second question they're facing is, how do you balance power between the large states and the small states? States with large population versus states with small population. How do you balance their interests? Well, for the first question, there are two plans to that effect. The Virginia plan, which presented by Madison, says basically scrap them and start over, which has 3 equal branches of government. You have an executive branch, which would be carry out the laws, enforce the laws. Legislative branch, which makes the laws, and a judicial branch, which interprets the laws. Basically, to make sure whatever the legislative branch passed was legal, constitutional, and to make sure the executive branch is carrying out those laws in a lawful manner. Basically, each would be a check on the other, not one to be too more powerful than the other. Although in practice, Congress was the dominant branch of government until the early 1900s. The national government make laws binding on states and people alike. That is, national federal law will be superior to state law. States have some power to make some of their own laws, but national government would have the last say. It's also proposing a 2-house legislature. The lower house decided by popular votes. The upper house would not be determined by the states, but by the lower house of Congress. States can nominate, suggest people, but the lower house is going to vote on the upper house. This basically ends up becoming the framework of the new national government. But extensive debates and modifications have followed. Basically, the 3-branch government we have today, designed by James Madison. Now, the New Jersey plan was submitted on June 15th. Proposed existing equal representation of states in a 1-house legislature. Basically, the same system, Congress, 1 house of Congress. Every state would have the same single 1 vote. But Congress didn't have the power to levy taxes, regulate commerce, authority to name a plural executive, no veto over anything Congress does. Basically, a group like 3 men who would act as president but did not have any real authority. Basically, just wave the crowd to the opening of shopping centers, things like that. And Congress would name a Supreme Court. Basically, all power vested in Congress, 1 dominant branch versus 3 equal branches. Well, on June 19th, the convention voted to abolish the Articles of Federation and move toward a government envisioned by the Virginia plan. So they're going to go with Madison's idea, but they're going to change up a lot of things here. The modification of the Articles of Federation under the New Jersey plan dropped. So they just want to scrap the whole thing, start over, go with Madison's Virginia plan. There's still a lot of serious issues to deal with, and we'll deal with that more next time. So keep reading book chapter 7. Also read the Constitution in the back of your book. Are there any questions? If not, we will discuss this more next time. You all have a good day.